What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I hope that you're having a great day. Thank you so much for being here. Today I am giving you guys and bringing you my album review of David Sylvian's debut album, Brilliant Trees, which was released in 1984. Now, David Sylvian is an artist that I'm already very familiar with, and when I say very familiar, he's my favorite artist of all time. I just felt like it would be appropriate for me to at least bring you an album review of his debut, and probably in the future I'll bring you some more. With his first solo output in a long lineage to come, Sylvian brings an air of artful sophistication, hints of exotica, and attentive experimentation with his debut. He's a poet whose prose distances as much as it draws in. His lyrical content ranges from questioning personal convictions to merry memories. Now, Sylvian obviously is not alone throughout this album in his compositions. He's working with other artists such as Ryuichi Sakamoto, Holger Suke, Danny Thompson, and much and many more. The music feels as if it's expanding from Sylvian into all these other people as they bring their creative sides into the album and the project. Most notably pertaining to Suke, who David named him as the wild card that he actually needed in the album. Suke would come bearing gifts. He would come with the IBM dictaphone, and he would play back certain tapes at different speeds to give the whole album kind of an abstract kind of feel. You also have Steve Jensen, former co-member of Japan alongside with Sylvian, and he arrives with a lot of creative drum work, some unique percussion, adding a rich texture to the progressions of each track. The album opens with Pulling Punches. It's a very funky and softly rocking kind of track, which nicely bridges the maturity that David would have with his band Japan in the last album, Tin Drum, moving into his first solo output. The bass, courtesy of Braithwaite, is very handedly groovy with a lot of movement and dynamics. The guitar is energetic and ambient kind of at the same time, which in some ways reminds me of Fripp's playing. And then, as expected, Sylvian's voice is both warm and charismatic, and it's an absolute delight to hear him in this art rock pop style that the album opens with. He approaches it with a certain freshness. This to me is the perfect musical jab as an opener, before the cross and the hook of the next two tracks, The Ink in the Well. Let me tell you, from the first few strums of the bass, courtesy of Danny Thompson, I'm in. Like, I still remember the first time I heard it. I am in. It's the presence of it that matches David's already very present voice. It's so refreshing to hear the two tango around each other if you just focus on them. The chorus is incredibly catchy, filled with a lot of different memorable movements. The quiet after the storm organ lead and acoustic strums of the chorus are very satisfying. And it's the second time that we're being graced by Kenny Wheeler on the flugelhorn. And then the final refrain. Listen, I sing this song a lot when I'm driving in the shower. Honestly, I just sing it all the time. But the final refrain, fire I will. The feeling of nostalgia is often one of joy of remembering forgotten happiness. And the track that carries its namesake, Nostalgia, carries that emotion with profound fulfillment. This is a deep well of melodies coexisting between synth and guitar and horn. It all exudes a very strong emotional response. And then the softly celebrated way that Sylvian says, my nostalgia. It just rings loving assurance. The single from the album, Red Guitar, kind of picks up the mood a little bit. It's kind of like a little catapult in the album, kind of giving us one last happy hurrah in the album before we move, before the mood shifts in the latter half. Jazzy guitar and Sakamoto's pianos carry these starry melodies and sensations. It's a very catchy composition with a lot of flavor, a lot of spirit, and once again, all the melodies are artfully done, but catchily done. Like, you'll be singing this. I play my red guitar. That's good. Weathered Wall represents a certain erosion in the album as we move from melody and depth and further into experiments with atonal sounds and melodic dissonance. It's very fitting musically and thematically how David sings of the loss of faith and belief The lamentful horns of Hassel make their first appearance here, and it just rings us with its otherworldly charm. Suge also shows his hand here in the little experimental subtleties, giving it sort of a material sensation. Upon the backwaters of serenity, a troubling melody stirs the mood. It's the uneasiness that we find in backwaters from the piano and the synths, especially in the back half of the track, that contrasts nicely with its stark nature. The rhythm stumbles with uneasiness, and just as Sylvian sings of hiding and regrets, the song contains a certain sense of danger and trying to hide away from something. But it's at the final track and the title track, Brilliant Trees, where we have one of the most gorgeous openings that we've heard so far, with Hassel's horns and Sakamoto's synth that are just caressing one another in harmony. There's a wonderful magic here that has an immediate effect. Sylvian's gentle and yet very persuasive crooning glides over this melodic glass. And then eventually, a faintly heard and a faintly rising ritual begin and emerges as quiet percussion begins to take over, takes form, and moves with cries of trumpet. It's a muted catharsis and climax for the album, choosing to end on its own whispered tones rather than perhaps the funk-driven power of its opening, and perhaps something that would be maybe a little more expected. I like how it takes its own musical life into its own hands and ends on its own terms. Anyways, those are just a couple of my thoughts on each of the songs here on the album, but why not get into my favorite moment, my favorite lyrics, and then my song rankings for the album. So my favorite moment on the album, and there's a lot, it's probably the very opening of Ink in the Well. I mean, it's just the bass, guys. It's the bass rules that song. Like I said, it's so cool to have, an instrument that has the same presence that Sylvian does. Because Sylvian already has a voice that is always at the forefront. Like, it's strong. It has a certain kind of power and depth to it. And how cool it is that he's matched by the bass being played there. I love that. And it's just cool to watch the two kind of dance around each other. It's almost like a kind of musical tango. And then my favorite lyrics on the album are taken from Nostalgia, and they are as follows. Voices heard in fields of green, their joy, their calm and luxury, are lost within the wanderings of my mind. I'm cutting branches from the trees, shaped by years of memories, to exorcise their ghost from inside me. So I like how he's very poetically actually describing nostalgia here. He talks about the fields of green and the joy and the calm and the luxury. When you think of nostalgia, you think of looking back in the past at happy things, and you get that here. But he says that they're lost within the wanderings of his mind. Nostalgia isn't a feeling that you typically have all the time. It kind of reemerges because of something. You see something, you hear something, you smell something, and all of a sudden your mind is taken back to that. So I like that he acknowledges here in the wanderings of his mind, these things are there, but they're not necessarily active. And then when he says that he's cutting branches from the trees, shaped by the years of memories to exorcise the ghost from inside of him, I like how he also uses the metaphor of a tree, like his life and his mind and the stems from the tree, the stems from his brain, continuing to grow and spread out, and he's cutting branches on the trees. Why is he cutting the branches? Well, he says to exorcise the ghost within him. So perhaps he's trying to cut down branches to exercise or get rid of some sort of negative feelings, some sort of negative memories that he's had, but he's not quite getting to the root of the problem. Perhaps he can't uproot and remove the tree itself, just cutting the branches off. And then my song rankings for the album are as follows, from my favorite to least favorite. The Ink in the Well, Nostalgia, Red Guitar, Brilliant Trees, Pulling Punches, Backwaters, Weathered Wall. This is such a stunning debut album for David Sylvian, and it's not my favorite Sylvian album, that'd be Secrets of the Beehive, but it's a really, really strong one. Like, really strong. And then, of course, his next album, Gone to Earth, well, we all know about that one. And just as an aside, I first listened to this album, I looked it up on RYM because I kept records of these things. I first listened to this album in September of 2009. How old was I? Like 18, 19? Something like that. Isn't that crazy? 20. I was 20. I don't even know why it took me that long. I was 20 years old when I heard this album. That was like 12 years ago. Oh my God. Anyways, let me know what you guys think of the album. Let me know your favorite moments, your favorite lyrics, and all of that stuff. I hope that you will. Leave those in the comments down below. You can also follow me in a bunch of places. You can support the channel on Patreon. Hope that you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoy the review. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.